Hey guys, how you doing today? Finally, internet's back up and running. I can actually do some recording. Oh man, I've been just moving and moving and moving and moving this last little bit. Getting my new apartment set up, getting the whole thing going. It's gonna be great. I'm actually gonna see if I can start doing some live streaming on YouTube soon. Probably from 6 to 9, I think. That makes sense to me. You know, people come home from work or they've got an evening where they're chilling out. Maybe they could pop in, say hello. Uh, anyway, that's just a thought. That's just something I'm thinking of doing. What do I even want to talk about today, man? I feel like I've been completely derailed. I feel like I'm completely out of rhythm. I feel like I'm out of sync with what my pattern was, what I was doing with the channel, what I was doing with my life. And it really makes me realize, like, there's this phrase that gets thrown around, ignorance is bliss. Oh boy, is that accurate. You know, the last couple of days I've just been able to kind of throw myself into the move, throw myself into that work, right? And because of the nature of it and because of the disconnect from the internet and everything, it's been a couple of days where I haven't actually really even been able to think about the channel, been able to think about any of this ridiculous nonsense that we're all going through, right? And there's something nice about that. You know, there's something nice about just deleting from your consciousness the meta reality that you live in, right? Like, you don't have to actually pay any attention to the high level meta concerns that, you know, inflict your life. And if you delete from your consciousness, right, any of these meta concerns, and what do I mean by meta concerns, right? I mean concerns that are larger than your day-to-day life, right? Like, climate change is a meta concern. It's something that you're sitting there thinking, okay, that's definitely an issue. It's definitely we need to focus on. It's definitely something that we need to deal with, but we can't really perceive it on a day-to-day sort of scale until the day where we will perceive it on a day-to-day scale, right? But if you just remove those sort of meta concerns from your consciousness, right, you can just sort of go whistling around, right? Pretend as though you live in a society that is based on cooperation. Pretend like everything is being done with your consent, right? You can make up this sort of mythology in your mind in order to sort of push away these high-level meta concerns. I see this all the time, right? I see this all the time, where people just, in order to not have to deal with the high-level concerns in their lives, they just sort of pretend as though what's going on is perfectly acceptable. And then when they finally kind of reach the moment of their death, right, the number one thing that people say when they get onto their deathbed, when they get into their old age, is, I worked too much. Why did I work so much? What was the point of it? Right? And they start asking those questions when they're like 80. I would prefer us to start asking those questions immediately, right? Immediately. And stop pretending as though wanting to exist in this world without the weight of a crushing social system or a collapsing environment. To stop pretending that wanting those things removed is somehow laziness. Like, this, to me, is the greatest success of the capitalist death cult. Convincing people that wanting incredibly normal, incredibly reasonable and rational things, clean water, breathable air, a safe food supply, a wage that actually not only pays their bills but also lets them live an appropriate life, an amount of hours that actually gives people the freedom to live a decent life, worth living, right? Like an education system that actually educates. Like I'm saying these things out loud and they seem so like banal and normal. Like I don't even think that you can take a political position on these things. Like these things, if you are not in agreement that everyone should have access to clean water, breathable air, then you're part of a death cult. Like it's very simple, but we've been so trained by the capitalist death cult to put aside obvious basic necessities that we all need, and to subserviate ourselves to the capitalist death cult, and to insist that you have to sell yourself into a market dominated by billionaires, that if you actually stand up and say, hey, I'm concerned that we're propelling ourselves into a situation where we're not going to have the basic necessities to have a livable life. Oh, well, you're just lazy, and oh, that's just made up nonsense. That's just communist bullshit, right? If you're one of these people who duck out of these videos around now, please be sure to like, share, subscribe. My Patreon is down below, The Canadian Commie. My website is thecanadiancommie.com, and my podcast is thesocialistagenda.com. We do weekly updates. Please tune in. Be sure to bookmark that website just in case YouTube takes me down. You'll have access to my new content as it comes up. And this ignorance is bliss sort of position extends into our economy and extends into our media as well. One of the things that our media is very good at is deflection, right? There comes a moment where there's a story that hits the populace that the media can't simply lie about, right? Like they can't lie about it. Usually they will lie about things in order to convince you that, you know, black is red or up is down or something like this, so that you'll subserviate yourself to the capitalist class. That's the role of the media in this country. But occasionally a story will come out, like the Canadian Infrastructure Bank, which is a fascist organization that has been erected by the Trudeau government, or the millions, if not billions of dollars funneled into corporate power, into corporate hands through the CEWS, right? Like, we can't afford a basic income, but boy howdy can we afford to give, you know, the Walmart family some money. And these stories, like, these are crippling stories. These are stories that should end political parties. Like, no, you don't get to erect a fascist organization and attempt to convince everybody that you're doing it somehow for the benefit of anybody, when the reality is it's a complete sellout to corporate power, right? Like, that seems like a pretty basic no-brainer, right? Like, it seems like a pretty straightforward position to take. And you'll notice, like, nobody's reporting on it. I've seen one opinion piece in the Toronto Star and a piece in the Jacobin. I haven't seen any genuine reporting on it from the Globe and Mail. I haven't seen any genuine reporting on it in the National Post, certainly not. Like, I haven't seen Global News, CTV, any of these places reporting on what should be, like, the story of the generation, right? Certainly the story of the Liberal Party. The idea that they can erect an institution that entrenches corporate power into the very base mechanisms of government. That if you want to build a bridge, even, you have to ask permission from the wealthiest people in the country. I mean, it is the definition of fascism, right? The merger of business and government. and here's the Liberal Party erecting an institution to do it, everybody should be screaming their heads off about it. Instead, we get, a couple hundred articles about Bill C-10, which is just whipping people's fear up, right? Like, Bill C-10 is, it's it's both ineffective and incapable of doing what people are claiming it will do, right? Like, it's not going to strip anybody of any rights or anything. It doesn't delete the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. But people are in such a scared spot. People live on fear. And they're right to be afraid, right? The Liberals are erecting fascist institutions. Of course people should be afraid. But what the media has done, right, is they've whipped up fear surrounding this sort of non-issue, right? They've deflected away from the actual issues, and they're whipping the populace up into a fearful frenzy in order to have them ignore. Because if you're paying attention to an issue that doesn't matter, then of course you can't also pay attention to an issue that significantly does. And more I'm beginning to see that, like, I guess I take for granted, and maybe this is the lesson for me, I take for granted that I've been studying economics for, a decade, maybe longer than that even now. Once it became obvious that the death cult was hiding behind this language of economics, right? That they were obfuscating actual scientific pursuit, or they were obfuscating sort of an ideology behind actual scientific pursuit. And once it became obvious that their entire mode was completely fraudulent, which was obvious right from the beginning, like basically the year I started to pursue any kind of economic understanding or any kind of understanding of economics, it was very obvious that trickle-down economics was a failed idea. Like, it doesn't work, and it's very clear. And once you accept that it doesn't work, then you can see it for what it is, which is just a pale excuse for the rich to steal from the poor, right? And once you understand that, you can see more and more that the wealthy are going to continue to create institutions in order to entrench their wealth in a permanent way into our society, which is an institution like the Canadian Infrastructure Bank, which we're not talking about. Instead, we're going to talk about Bill C-10 until we're blue in the face, and then that legislation will pass. Nothing will change because the bill is both ineffective. It's ineffective at both regulating the telecom companies as well as stripping people of their civil rights. It does neither, and yet we're supposed to take seriously all the hysteria surrounding it. And so the lesson that I'm learning for myself is that I take for granted that people sort of accept my base premise. The trickle-down economics doesn't work. But that's not the case, right? People do genuinely believe that, oh, this should work, right? Giving millionaires and billionaires more money will result in them spending that money, right? In order to grow their business or all of this kind of stuff. But it's an obvious grift. It's an obvious lie, right? They're taking that money and they're jamming it into offshore accounts. It's very clear. We have the Panama Papers that show this to be the case. We have the Rand Corporation, which operates from the Pentagon, outright admitting that this is the case, right? You have to live in kind of a delusional headspace in order to maintain this idea that billionaires are going to spend the money that they get instead of just hoard it into offshore accounts the way that they do. And so I need to get a little bit more precise and It's recently I've been watching Michael Hudson, right? Michael Hudson is great. He's a really wonderful economist. He's been doing good work with, oh, of course I'm going to blank on this group. It's not the serfs. There's another group. Oh, isn't that horrible? Isn't it horrible? But the, so Michael Hudson, he does very good work and letting people know all about how the North American economies have been parasticized, right? They've been parasticized by what's called financial institutions. That, like, a lot of hay has been made about how, oh, China's using capitalist ideas and that's how they built their society. Oh, see, capitalism works. But what the Chinese are doing is allowing people in a very tight, controlled way to enact, yes, capitalist structural ideas, so long as those capitalists are actually building things that are benefiting the society, right? And who declares if it's benefiting the society? Well, the officials that actually run the society, right? Whereas here in North America, the financial institutions that exist here in North America are completely worthless. They provide no value. They do nothing of any benefit to anyone. Like, if you're a day trader and you trade, $1 million from one currency to another, make yourself, a little money for the day, there's no value in that. It's nothing important. It's like this false creation of like fake money that doesn't actually benefit anyone, which is why this term, and it's so funny to me that this term is starting to gain in popularity, the idea of the real economy, right? Because we're starting to accept even the parasite, even the financial institutions themselves are beginning to understand that there's a fake economy. And that fake economy is a parasite that is ruled by a death cult that's growing and becoming larger and larger by the day. And when it collapses, right? Because if all you do is create fake stuff your whole life, right? Eventually people are going to look at it and go, hey, this is fake, right? And when it collapses, it's going to leave like a horror show in its wake. And that's one thing that's been sort of difficult to come back to after taking a little bit of a break from it, right? To sit down in front of my computer and begin doing more research and beginning to read the news again and to really see that, oh yeah, like the collapse of the Western economies, the North American economies specifically, right, is going to leave a horror show in its wake. It's going to make this COVID stuff look absolutely manageable, right? It's going to make this whole situation look like, oh, well, that's completely fine. But the horror show that follows is going to leave behind it a bunch of people who are living in kind of an ignorance is bliss situation, where all of these people are suddenly going to be completely wiped out and completely bamboozled by these financial parasites, these death cultists, who will just take the money and run, right? That's all they're going to do. They'll take the money and run, and they'll attempt to do what they've always done, which is to parasticize back into the government, right? With the, Canadian Infrastructure Bank and these sorts of things. They'll find their ways to make themselves, to continue sucking on the side of the society while millions of people are abandoned, right? Because if you've built your entire economy on a complete and total fiction, then eventually that comes to a head, right? Like, what happens when the American dollar is no longer considered the reserve currency? What happens when the American dollar is no longer taken seriously? on the world stage as they continue to embark on their madcap journey of insanity, right? And so, this is what draws me back. Because there was a moment, I had a moment where I thought to myself, I could just stop this. I could just fold it all up, stop doing it, just go work some stupid job. But the reality is that, at this point I know too much. I've seen too much. And when the whole thing collapses, and when it begins to start taking down large segments of our economy, there are going to be a lot of people standing around going, well, what the hell happened? Well, what the hell happened? And people like me are going to have to be there with this channel and the information that exists on this channel to say, well, what the hell happened? Well, let me tell you. You've been living in a dream world. And that's going to be the worst of it. Because all of these people who have been living in a dream world this whole time are going to suddenly wake up and realize the Santa Claus isn't real, right? That the mythologies that they've built in their imaginations are fake, right? And in this moment, when people are scared and actually living in the world, finally, but they don't know anything about the world that they live in, well, this is the moment that people turn to far-right demagogues and tyrants. This is the moment when grifters and conmen and criminals come in and scoop them up. We've already seen it happen in America once. We'll see it happen again, and it'll be much more serious. And so we need to do this work. Because if we don't, then we're the ones abandoning our brothers and sisters. That the capitalists have structured the society in order to abandon people, as they have through this COVID-19 crisis repeatedly. And so we can't stoop to that level. We have to be better than the capitalists. And so ignorance is bliss. Alright guys, this is the end of me. If you've made it to this point, you have to like, you have to share, you have to subscribe. I promise, I'm not always so morose or grim. Although I shouldn't make that promise. I'm often this morose and this grim. Please be sure to like, please be sure to share, please be sure to subscribe. TheCanadianCommie.com, TheSocialistAgenda.com. Please go and bookmark those places so that when my YouTube channel is taken down, you can actually still find me. If you want to give me $1, Patreon's down below. You are doing wonderfully. I know you are, right? You, like me, are living in a real space. You're attempting to discover what's going on in the world. You're attempting to discover what's going on in this place. You've lost faith in the capitalist institutions for good reason. They've structured the system to abandon you completely. Under these circumstances, you are doing wonderfully. You're making good decisions for yourself. You're making good decisions for the people around you. You're making good decisions for your community. You're doing everything right. The capitalists spend billions of dollars to gaslight you. They spend billions of dollars to convince you that you are something other than what you are. And what you are is a divine being standing on divine energy. And we could use some of it right now. Good luck. We're going to need it.